All right, let's talk about a time with no war, no real warning, just a terrifying economic crash that basically vaporized fortunes overnight. It plunged an entire nation into a decade of hunger and dust. This is the incredible story of the Great Depression. I mean, this sentence just says it all, doesn't it? It captures that brutal, personal shock of the collapse. This wasn't some slow decline. For millions of people, it was like walking off a cliff. One day, you're mapping out your entire future, and the very next, you're just fighting to survive the present. It's that suddenness that is just so chilling. So, how in the world did we get to that cliff? Well, we have to go back to the party before the hangover, the Roaring Twenties. The Great War was over, people were optimistic, and the economy was, well, it was running on pure vibes. There was this really infectious belief that the good times were never, ever going to end. And you could feel the power of this boom everywhere. Factories went from making tanks to churning out shiny new toasters and vacuums. Henry Ford's assembly line got so crazy efficient that it could build a whole car in just 90 minutes. Think about that. This wasn't just growth. It was like the economy was a rocket ship, pulling every other industry along for the ride. And brand new technology was wiring the whole nation together. By 1929, 10 million homes had radios. That means 10 million families were hearing the same jazz music and, this is the important part, the very same advertisements. Mass culture and mass consumerism were literally born right there, buzzing through the airwaves into people's living rooms. But here's the thing. This party wasn't for everybody. While the cities were all lit up with electricity and easy credit, rural America was having a really hard time. Farmers who'd done well during the war were now facing rock-bottom prices for their crops. They took on debt to buy new tractors, but really that just helped them go broke a little bit faster. This dangerous divide was getting wider and wider. You know, this whole era pretty much ran on a buy now, pay later philosophy for everything from a new radio to risky stocks. And there's a huge lesson in that for us. Learning how to spot the difference between a real opportunity and just pure hype, that's like giving your brain a superpower. It helps you navigate your own financial journey with so much more wisdom. So all that optimism and borrowed money, it spilled over into the one place it could do the most damage, Wall Street. The stock market became this national obsession. It was kind of like a casino where everybody thought they had a winning system. And this right here, this was the jet fuel for the fire. Margin loans. The idea was super simple. You put a little bit of your own money down, maybe 10%, and you borrow the rest to buy stocks. The entire system was built on one single incredibly fragile belief, that stocks would only go up. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? And this is where things get kind of wild. You had shoeshine boys giving stock tips to bankers. You had bellboys telling millionaires what to buy. When your barber feels like a Wall Street tycoon because of his stock picks, you know things have gotten disconnected from reality. It wasn't about a company's real value anymore. It was all about the vibes. Now, a few people did try to sound the alarm. An economist named Roger Babson was practically screaming that a crash was coming. And how did Wall Street react? They pretty much laughed at him and told him to relax. The sound of all that easy money was just way too loud to hear the voice of reason. And then it happened. October 29th, 1929. Black Tuesday. That was the day the party didn't just end. It face-planted into a solid brick wall. The market didn't just dip, it plunged. The numbers are just mind-blowing. In today's money, over $200 billion of wealth just vanished. Poof. And this wasn't monopoly money. We're talking about real homes, real retirement funds, real dreams. All gone in the blink of an eye. The crash started this catastrophic domino effect. So first, those margin loans came due. Brokers called up investors and said, we need the money you borrowed, but nobody had it. So as investors went broke, the banks who'd made the loans started to wobble, and then they started to fail, one by one. And because U.S. banks were calling in their loans from all over the world, the crisis went global and basically froze the entire world economy. And in the middle of all this chaos, what was the official response? Total denial. President Hoover actually went on the radio sounding all calm and assured everyone that the economy was fundamentally sound. But for the millions of Americans staring at empty dinner tables, those words meant nothing. The disconnect was just shocking. And you know, you'd think the stock market crash was the bottom. It wasn't. It was just the beginning of the fall. We're now moving into the decade where those numbers on a stock ticker turned into empty stomachs and desperate faces. The Great American Party was over. The data tells such a brutal story. In just 4 years, unemployment exploded from a pretty healthy 3% to a catastrophic 25%. Just pause and think about that. 1 out of every 4 people who wanted a job, who needed to feed their family, simply couldn't find one. The mighty engine of American industry had just seized up. A whole new, tragic vocabulary entered the American language. People who lost their homes built these little shanty towns they sarcastically called Hoovervilles. They slept under Hoover blankets, which were just old newspapers. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, nature itself seemed to turn on people as giant black blizzards, these huge dust storms, just swallowed up entire farms. The country wasn't just broke, it felt broken. And yet, people endured. They stood in lines, they moved across the country looking for work, they held their families together. It wasn't about optimism anymore, it was about pure, stubborn endurance. It really makes you wonder, right? When the big systems we all rely on completely fall apart, where does that human strength to just keep going come from? By 1933, America was at rock bottom, desperate for a new leader, for anyone with a plan. And that's when Franklin Delano Roosevelt came along. His inauguration really felt like a massive shift, a promise of bold, new ideas. And with those famous words, it felt like the entire country took its first deep breath in years. It was more than just a great line in a speech. It was a declaration that the time for being paralyzed by fear was over. It was time to fight back. And fight back they did. Roosevelt and his administration unleashed this whole alphabet soup of new programs. Some, like the CCC and WPA, were all about immediate relief, putting millions of people back to work building our roads and bridges and national parks. Others were designed for long-term reform, to fix the broken system for good. That's where we get the SEC to police the stock market, the FDIC to protect our money in banks, and of course, Social Security. These weren't just temporary fixes, they were entirely new rules for the game. And the impact of this was just profound. You have people who, a year earlier, were standing in a bread line, desperate for a handout. Now, they were standing on scaffolding, earning a paycheck, building something real. That's the key. The New Deal rebuilt pride. It wasn't just about the money. It was about restoring the dignity of work to a nation that had lost its way. Now, the road back was long, and it was really hard. This didn't all happen overnight. From the absolute depths of the crash in '29, through the bold actions of the New Deal, and into a slow, grinding recovery in the late 30s, America just, piece by piece, started to put itself back together. The Great Depression ended not with a big party, but with hard work, blistered hands, and a whole new set of rules. It completely reshaped America's relationship with its government, with the economy, and with itself. So I'll leave you with this thought to chew on. From the Social Security card in your wallet to the FDIC sticker on your bank's store, the fingerprints of this era are all over our lives today. What parts of that legacy do you think shape our world the most?